let's go to Danielle Smith. And I know I'm just completely shifting gears here, but Israel and Hamas and the war is not the only thing in the world. And we're interested in other things too. So here's Danielle Smith, who was actually attending like a lefty environmentalist event, which I guess I give her credit for doing. I mean, they hate Alberta. They're funded, it's the Pembina Institute. They're funded by foreign sources to shut down Alberta's oil patch for the benefit of OPEC and Russia. I mean, they're pretty it's like Greenpeace. When was the last time you ever saw Greenpeace complain about an OPEC country? Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Venezuela, Qatar. You just never do, which is really, really noticeable. Once you say it, you can't unnotice it again. I mean, they're against North American energy, and the UK actually has some North Shore offshore oil. But you would think, I mean, Venezuela and Saudi Arabia are the number one and number two oil reserves in the world. Canada is number three. Depends on how you measure. Canada's number two or number three. Well, why are they silent about Venezuela? Why are they silent about all those other OPEC regimes? And so if you've got a group like the Pembina Foundation, the Pembina Institute, that just craps on Canadian ethical oil, it's obvious that they're either with full knowledge or unwittingly in the service of Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran. And that's not just speculation. What's the world's largest natural gas company? There's different ways of measuring. You could say that Qatar is up there, but Gazprom is probably the answer. That's the Russian state strategic company. So there is some private sector ownership of it, but the Kremlin controls it. It cannot enter into any foreign contracts without the approval of Putin. And that's a long way of saying Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, attended a conference put on by these oil patch haters. Is it a good idea or not? I'm not sure. This is a version of the video with the counter signal logo on it, but it's not their video. It was, I think, published by Max Fawcett. But let's take a look at Danielle Smith sparring with an environmentalist. I think she gets the better of him. You take a look.
Does anyone think that would be possible to get that built in 12 years, starting now? I mean, you go ahead and talk to Jonathan Wilkinson then, because I can tell you, Site C began in 1954. Site C began in 1954. Fine. Do you think I can get? I can get an equivalent amount of nuclear rolled out in 12 years? Do you think I could do that in an environment that we've never had nuclear before?
I don't want to interrupt the two of you.
What do you know?
And I get, and I.
What do you know that my industry experts don't know about? Well, you know, and what do I do when there's no sun and there's no wind? Batteries, let's talk about batteries,
Danielle,
because I've talked to somebody. I want to talk about batteries for a minute, because I know that everybody thinks that this economy is going to be operated on wind and solar and battery power, and it cannot. There is no industrialized economy in the world operating that way, because they need base load. And I'll tell you what I know about batteries, because I talked to somebody who was thinking of investing in it on a 200 megawatt plant. $1 million to be able to get each megawatt stored. That's $200 million for his plant alone, and he would get 1 hour of storage. So if you want me to have 12,000 megawatts of storage, that's $12 billion for 1 hour of storage, $24 billion for 2 hours of storage, $36 billion for 3 hours of storage. And there are long stretches in winter where we can go weeks without wind or solar. That is the reason why we need legitimate, real solutions that rely on base load power rather than fantasy thinking. And I am not going to engage in fantasy thinking and say something is possible when I know that my principal job,
I think we need to stop.
My principal job is to have a reliable energy grid. That's what I'm trying to do.
I think I understand. That got interesting, didn't it?
So there she was sparring with some environmental activists, and good for her. What does she call it? Fantasy thinking. Yeah, I remember when I published my book, Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands, and then I did a follow-up called Groundswell, The Case for Fracking. I said that the test for energy ethics is not oil with all of its problems versus some fantasy fuel of the future that's perfect in every way other than it doesn't exist, like dilithium crystals in Star Trek, or if you ever watched the insufferable Avatar series, I only watched the first one, they were looking for an element called unobtainium, which is pretty on the nose, isn't it? Unobtainium. It's perfect, except we just don't have it. So if you're comparing oil or gas or nuclear against some fantasy fuel of the future, of course it's not going to measure up. But if you are in real life, you have to say serious things and saying, oh, we'll just have solar and wind and then these giant batteries and that'll work. Maybe one day it will. I mean, never say never. I mean, there's some smart guys out there like Elon Musk really trying to make it work. But Elon Musk is not against oil or gas or nuclear. In fact, he says it's all essential. How are you going to power the electrical grid? Solar ain't going to do it. Maybe one day. I mean, could be. I mean, they've been trying to make alchemy work for a few centuries, turn lead into gold. Maybe one day they can. Who am I to say otherwise? But so far they haven't. Maybe one day the unreliables, as Alex Epstein calls them, he says, don't say renewables and non-renewables, say reliables and unreliables. Solar don't work when it's dark out. Wind don't work when it's not windy or when it's too windy. And by the way, the amount of space taken up by solar and wind is enormous compared to the tiny footprint of a nuclear plant or even oil and gas, most of which is under the surface. So if someone says, no, I've got just around the corner, we've got this perfect techno future. Okay, let me know when that's here. But in the meantime, I think I got to fill my car up with gas today or tomorrow. So while you guys are daydreaming about your fantasy Star Trek fuel source, I got to fill up my car with gas, and the choice back here in the real world is either between conflict energy from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Nigeria, Russia, or ethical energy from, it's a very short list of countries, Canada, the United States, North Sea oil, which, Norway, UK. That's about it. It's not from the chocolate-making superpowers of, Switzerland and Belgium. Those are good places, but they don't have any oil. So good for her for going into the lion's den and saying, back here in reality, what you're talking about is a fantasy. Oh, hi, everybody. Did you know that every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we have a live stream where we talk about the news of the day, go over viral videos, hot tweets, hot takes, and we read your comments. In fact, if you make what's called a super chat or a rumble rant of $5 or more, we'll read your comment on the air and respond to it. I've been doing a lot of these live streams lately, but when I'm not here, my friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies do it too, and they are way more fun than me. But either way, it is a good show, and it's a way to stay up to date with the news of the day in short, snappy updates. It's not scripted, it's a live stream, and it's fun. You can always watch us on Rumble on YouTube, or just go to rebelnews.com. That's every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern. See you there.